Is it morning or afternoon there in Sao Paulo, Valdemar?
It's 4 o'clock, 10 past 4 in the afternoon.
The
One,
afternoon. So
yes,
good
yes.
afternoon to you in Sao Paulo. It's a real pleasure to have you here. You're another person that's going to be presenting at this Mystech conference in August, and you come with your own specialization. Do you want to start by telling the audience a little bit about your background before we talk about what it is that you're going to be
Yes.
presenting?
Well, my father was a big scientist. He introduced soil science here in Brazil, pedology.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very anxious about my education. Uh, so I ended up studying electronic engineering at the School of Engineering that was supposed, a new one, that was supposed to be Brazilian's MIT. It
Okay.
was uh, it was organized by Americans. It was a boarding school, and when I was in third year of the five engineering years, um, I met my future wife, and her parents were deep anthroposophists. Uh, they were the ones that inaugurated the first, jointly with other people, the
Mm-hmm.
first Waldorf school in Brazil. Now we have 265 schools. Can you imagine that?
Wow, wonderful.
In fact, Brazil is the country with the highest grade of, how to say, increase in number of Waldorf schools in the
So
world.
rate of growth of
The first one.
yeah.
I think Waldorf's education has met here a very open-minded people, very open-minded people, and also Brazilians are very sensitive, socially sensitive, very, very socially sensitive. Every foreigner that comes here gets enthusiastic about the way we receive foreigners.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we have had a big mix of races and cultures from Africa, from Europe. My parents and my wife's parents came from Europe, and so, for instance, there have there has never been uh, racism among the lowest social classes.
Uh-huh.
In the highest classes, you have, I think, until our times, a little bit, but we have very strict laws against racism and discrimination.
Yeah.
In fact, one of my theories is that we are in a glorious time of human rights. Before that, we had the evolution of freedom. The how to say, getting rid of slavery and so on. But nowadays, we are progressing in human rights. For instance, here in Sao Paulo, you'll see many sidewalks where they have cut the edge so that people with wheelchairs can move around. So you
Mm-hmm.
see, this is new. 10, 15 years ago, it didn't exist at all. So you see how people are developing a sense for the other people's eye, the sense for the eye, because all the eyes are the same, of the same nature. So everybody should regard the other person as having the same nature and having the same rights and so on. And here, this is very strong here in Brazil. Also, Brazilians are very, I think, they are very sensible. For instance, it's very seldom to find somebody smoking in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people that smoke, but you don't find them. It's very, very rare. This movement of getting rid with smoking has been very, very strong here, very naturally. You see, young people don't feel the urge to smoke and so on. And when I go to Europe to visit my daughters, I have three daughters living there, one in Spain and two in Germany. I'm always impressed with the amount of people that smoke, in the streets, and cigarette butts that you find on the sidewalks. Here you almost don't find any, because very, very few people smoke. So it's very interesting that Brazilians had this sense, for what is correct or what is just, also mainly socially, right?
That sensitivity that you talked about there is interesting, because I recently, so within the last 6 months or so, that I read that apparently Stein had said something along the lines of, if the impulses that are supposed to come from Eastern Europe fail to materialize, then it might end up coming from Brazil, which was it's very interesting to hear you describing what's going on there. And of course, like, if there's one person, somebody like myself who hardly knows anything about Brazil, the Christ or the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro, it's like it is the symbol of what is living there. Very interesting.
Yes. Also, mysticism is very spread around. We have many voodoo currents, two of them very serious, and very spread around. Also, very interesting is that the impulse given by Allan Kardec, the French, the Spiritism, as we call here. I don't know the right word in English, because the Spiritism and spiritualism is a little bit mixed in English. But
Is
here
it perhaps got a little bit of animism in it as well? Or no? Okay.
Well, this was introduced by Allan Kardec, and in the middle of the 18th century, 19th century, and very, very interesting. He spoke about incarnation very openly, right? And at that same time, I think he was the first one to speak openly about reincarnation. And writing about this, he has many books, and he tried to introduce a kind of scientific spiritualism in the following way. He asked questions to mediums, right? Mediums. And when two or three of them gave the same answer, he would note the answer and put the answer on his books, and in his books. And the books are full of questions and answers. So he tried, and he was working at the same time as Darwin. So I think it was a kind of balance between Darwinism, materialistic Darwinism, and Spiritism. That was the only opening that existed at that time to the spiritual worlds. And very interesting that this has spread around Brazil. There are millions and millions of spiritists here, and there are two kinds of them: the religious ones and the scientific, what they call themselves scientific ones, right? Those that try to keep concepts about the spirit and so on and so forth. So when anthroposophy was brought here in Brazil, I think it found a very fertile soil, right? It's very interesting that for many years we had a very strong anthroposophical medicine movement in Brazil. My wife was for 8 years the president of the Brazilian Association of Medical Doctors, or anthroposophic medicine. For 8 years, she was the president. And this we had hundreds and hundreds of anthroposophic doctors. There are many courses. How do you say? Uh,
Training courses or
what did you say?
Training courses, perhaps?
Training courses for anthroposophic medicine. We had a clinic also here in São Paulo. There is another one in Minas Gerais, but it doesn't matter. And there were very few schools. And I had a theory for that. Why the United States had so many Waldorf schools, but almost no anthroposophic doctors, when we had an enormous amount of anthroposophic doctors and very few schools, many years ago. And I had a theory that in the United States, people are so practical; they want to see results, and Waldorf education gives immediate results. If you enter a kindergarten, a Waldorf kindergarten, you get enthusiastic.
Feel it, yeah.
Right? It's so human, so full of love. Everybody gets enthusiastic. They see the results immediately. And also in the school with arts and so on, and the way the students are so happy, they, it's so common that a Waldorf student keeps looking for returning to classes after vacations, which is almost impossible in other schools. We had so many doctors and so few teachers and schools. And I had a theory, because in the United States, being practical, and also very flexible in education, very, very flexible. But here in Brazil, education is very, very tight, controlled by laws.
Authoritarian.
To be a teacher, you have to have a university course, a faculty course, and so on and so forth. To be a high school teacher, you have to be a specialist. That means you have to have graduated in mathematics or physics or chemistry and so on. Otherwise, or history or geography, you cannot be a high school teacher. The laws are very tight. Yeah. And in the United States, it's the contrary. But the medicine here was very flexible. For instance, since the beginning of last century, we have had a homeopathic faculty of medicine in Rio de Janeiro. So you see, and politicians.
This balance.
Lately, I think education has been so bad in Brazil, but so bad, you just cannot imagine. I think only 4% of students graduating in high schools, 4% of them have the minimum knowledge of mathematics. It's a little bit better in Portuguese because they speak the language, but don't speak the symbols of mathematics. So, as a side comment, I introduced in my faculty in the Institute of Mathematics and Statistics of the University of São Paulo. The University of São Paulo is the main university in Latin America. It has just gotten the 85th position ranking in 100 ranking of worldwide world universities. It's the only university in Brazil with this ranking among the first 100 ones, and also in Latin America. And what I did was that I thought mathematics is the main educational problem in Brazil, certainly in other countries as well. So I introduced in 2015 a program in my institute called the Ambassadors of Mathematics. And it consists of myself and other colleagues offering lectures in mathematics to get the students enthusiastic about mathematics. As a matter of fact, Angus, next Sunday, I'm going to give a lecture under this program in a synagogue. It will be the first lecture in the series, right?
Yeah.
It's 2015, given in a religious temple. I'm very curious about that. But I introduce many in my lectures. I give many lectures in this program. I offer many lectures, and I always try to introduce a little bit of the spirit, right, in the lecture. This lecture I'm going to hold next Sunday. It's called "Mathematics Can Be Interesting, and Beautiful." I wrote about a book about that. This is the book.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes, this is the book. Based on
it's definitely one of the challenges in education, isn't it? It's one of the things, getting students to not select thinking they just have to get a grade in a subject, but actually developing a passion for it so that they want to learn.
At least an interest. So in this lecture, I show how nature follows mathematical rules, right? Calling the attention that if we recognize the rules in nature, in plants, also in animal symmetries and so on, then we can develop an admiration, a veneration for how extraordinary those things can be, right, in nature. Well, I graduated in electronic engineering, and when I was in the third year of the 5 years, in the third year, my future father-in-law gave me the book.
These were the ones that were anthroposophists, like deeply into anthroposophy, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
He was the one. He gave me. We began to talk. He asked me if I had heard about Steiner, and I said yes. I watched the film. One of I think Fellini's film. One of the most famous Fellini's films, there is a Steiner figure there. And he said, no, not exactly. And he gave me the book, How to Attain Knowledge of the Higher
Worlds. Yeah.
Unfortunately, translate the most recent translations into Portuguese is Knowledge of Higher Worlds. I think this is a big mistake that I find very often in English translations, not just in this book, in other books as well, because Steiner changed the name Philosophy of Freedom, Philosophie der Freiheit. He changed into the philosophy of spiritual activity. So the British and Americans feel free to change all the titles. And many of them don't use the GA number.
Yes.
And this makes references very, very difficult. Very difficult. I translated a book by Frederick Emrein. I don't know if you are acquainted.
Yes, I know. He's a professor of German. He's a Goethe scholar, amongst other things.
Yeah. This is the translation. This is the translation of his book. Right? The book is Kicking Away the Ladder, the philosophy of order of education. I translated the whole book. It didn't sound very well. I had to change a little bit, letting the ladder behind. That was the translation, because kicking out doesn't sound very well. Well, and I had many difficulties finding references, because many times they don't put. I don't recall if Emrein did that, but it's very common that in English versions there is no GA number and the title is completely different. So when you want to locate a volume, volume of a lecture cycle and so on, it's so difficult. You just can't imagine. I have this difficulty, and my wife Sonia as well.
But you spent time in Germany. Is your German good enough to read German fluently? Because I actually do go back to the German myself. That's one of the things that I got fairly early, as early as was possible, really. It's like a full, complete GA, all 356 conference cycles.
Yes. Well, I read quite well. I also translate from Germany, but from German, but only verses from small text from Stein and so on. I've never translated the whole book, right? But my wife was a medical doctor, is retired, and her profession now is translating books from Steiner. She has just completed the 6 volumes of the Karma lectures.
Karmic relationships. Wonderful.
Karmic relationship.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I have just finished revising the translation. There was a reviser, right? But for the language, I'm revising the text itself, the contents, the meanings, and so on. And then I sit behind her at her side, and we check all my observations, no? So that, and then I introduce that into the PDF version, so on, so that the first 2 are ready. The third one I'm working with. I have not received the 4th, 5th, and 6th volumes as well. So this is one of the things I've been doing. But I was telling you about my education. So I was in the third. I was telling you that I was in the 3rd year of the engineering school when I got this book, How to Attain Knowledge of Higher Worlds, and I was absolutely fascinated. I was 21. For at least 13 years, since I was 8 or 7, 8, 16 years, I had been studying at school and at the Faculty of Engineering, and no teacher or professor mentioned that to attain a real knowledge, you have to make a progress you have to purify your soul, right? Nobody had said, or that you have to perfect yourself, right? So that what you produce has to be good, right? Nobody had said that, and that was, as a matter of fact, as a side comment, I made a review of this book, How to Attain Knowledge. It's also in English. It was translated into English by another person. I make the revision. It's in English. You may find it on my website.
What is your website so that I can add it to the details?
Do you have an access to the internet? Certainly. Make a search with Valdemar Setzer. Just that.
Valdemar
Setzer.
Okay.
You'll get to my homepage.
Okay, great. I'll add that to the show notes. Great.
Do you have it?
Yes, I've got it. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, with my picture that they read.
Yeah, I can see your picture top right.
Yes.
On the left, it's in English, and on the right, it's in Brazilian, Portuguese.
I began to write this many years ago, in the beginning of the internet. I began to write my website in English because I thought I was directing myself to the world. But then the Brazilians started to complain. I had to write it, and I ended up writing many more texts in Portuguese than in English. But you may see that there are many in English. Also, there is a section in Anthroposophy, and in this section, Anthroposophy and I think spiritualism or something like that, you'll find this paper, this review of how to attain knowledge of
you've got a lot of subjects: electronic media, television, video games, computing education, philosophy, science, spirituality, educational resources.
Yeah, spirituality. I don't remember if I have anthroposophy as a title, as a subject there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that this book, How to Attain Knowledge, I found 173 soul attitudes, 173. The story is that I and my wife went to the city of Santos, our
Yeah.
biggest port, and to give lectures, a weekend course on meditation. So I browsed this book, and I found many soul attitudes. So I counted them 59. But then when I went to write this paper, I went through the book very carefully, every paragraph and so on, and I found 173. And there are very few exercises, Angus, very few exercises, the seed exercise and so on, very few exercise. Most of the book is how to perfect your soul that you can have correct spiritual experiences. It's very astonishing, right?
Can I ask a question there? Because there's
just one thing.
About the soul. But you said something really interesting with these soul attitudes, because in in this lecture series, Human and Cosmic Thoughts, where he talks about the 12 worldviews and the 7 soul moods. Is that something you recognize? The 7 soul moods. There's like the 12 worldviews and the 7 soul moods in there.
I thought
anyway,
was it the 7 vital forces?
No, life processes are something different. This is. Okay. The question I was going to ask, and we can just leave it there, because this is something that I know a lot of people are interested in. The 7 soul moods within the 12 worldviews. And if you had seen any relationship between those 7 soul and all of these soul attitudes you're talking about here.
No, I didn't look for that. No.
There's some research for either you or me in the future then.
I just wanted to say that my paper can be a guide to reading How to Attain Knowledge of Higher Worlds, because I have, every of these one of these attitudes also classified between among thinking, feeling, and willing, right? Anyhow, I was going back. I was in the engineering school, and when I was in third year, I was studying modern physics.
Yeah.
And the professor destroyed the world on the blackboard with quantum mechanics. Destroyed the world because he said it will never be possible to count how many electrons there are in the world, if this has any importance at all. But anyhow, this is the consequence of, and lately I had an idea that we will never know, using physics, the physics methodology of today, we'll never know what matter is. Why? Because if you take an atomic particle, if to examine a particle or something, anything, you have to inject energy and extract energy from it, right? That's how we see things, right? They absorb some energy and emit light. So, but the minimum amount of energy that one can insert into an atomic particle changes completely its natural state. So we'll never be able to know what matter is in atomic terms. So if we don't know what an atom is, the electron is not a tiny ball and it doesn't rotate around the nucleus, right? According to quantum mechanics, right? There are very precise models for the atom, for very simple atoms, not for complex atoms. But and they can foresee the results of experiments and so on. with an astronomical precision, but we'll never know what these particles are. So I have a saying that a materialist is a person that lives and works in a building, and the building that has no ground floor. You understand?
I recognize that straight out of the philosophy of freedom.
Well, he doesn't go into
different context, but exactly
yeah.
the same picture.
Yeah, yes. Well, yes, but mine is much, I think, much more concrete. You see,
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
According to the present knowledge, or I think the future knowledge, we'll never know what an atomic particle is in its natural state. We measure with instruments when these particles are changed, accelerated, and so on and so forth, and collide with others and so on. But these are not the natural, these particles are not anymore in the natural state.
Mm-hmm.
And these experiments use instruments. So what we are getting are numerical measurements done by instruments. It's not the natural nature, right? Okay. So
Yeah.
physics is in the business of foreseeing future results of of measurements done by instruments using experiments that change nature. That's the business of physics, right? And when they say they are getting a better understanding of nature, that's not correct. They are getting a better understanding of the changed nature by instruments and so on, right? And here, so when I was 21, getting this book on my hands, reading the book, and studying modern physics, I realized that science was not good enough, right? And I entered very deep into anthroposophy. This is 62 years ago. I became a member of the Anthroposophic Society in 1971. In 1980, member of the School of Spiritual Science. And since then, and I decided to dedicate myself to science and to technology so that I could criticize it from the inside and not from the outside. So I had to become a scientist. This was a big, big sacrifice from my part because, my inner self is not a scientist, it's a humanist. He is a humanist, right? So I had to produce scientifically, and I entered what was at that time in the 60s the most advanced technology, computers. So I took computer courses at the university, digital circuits in the university, and so on and so forth. And I, after graduation, I went to the University of São Paulo and began to organize and direct the computer center there. So the first computer center at the University of São Paulo was my creation, and I directed it for many, many years. Uh, and so when you see, I wanted to put science in its right place, being a scientist and not being a humanist, right? And
Understanding science from the inside so that you're able to see where it falls
For
short.
instance, I understand how machine learning, a very bad expression, as usual in the computers field, people have used very, very wrong expressions. For instance, I don't know, Angus, if you know that in the beginning, a unit was called storage unit, data storage unit, not memory. And later on, people began to speak about the computer memory. This is absolutely wrong because we don't know how our memory works, and we know precisely how
It
the
works,
computer memory works. So you should not use the same word. Also, you have been speaking about artificial intelligence with Andrew and Frank. This is also a very, very bad expression because we don't know scientifically what intelligence is. So we cannot say that something has intelligence, whatever, artificial intelligence, because we don't know what intelligence is, right? So this is very bad. And in particular, all these expressions, machine learning, machines don't learn. They record data, calculate parameters to transform new data into some results, data results. This is not machine learning at all. It's calculating parameters, right? So, and when people use these expressions, they are mystifying. I don't know if this is correct word.
Yeah, perfect word. Yeah,
mystifying what the human, what the machine is and what the human being is, because they are reducing, they are elevating machines to our level and reducing our levels to the machines, right? So I've always been, for years and years, I've been criticizing these expressions, but I use them because, everybody used them, right? So, and I know how machine learning works from the inside, the nets and so on, and convolution and so on, and the algorithms that are used to calculate the parameters. And I know very well that when you give thousands, hundreds of thousands of input data, for instance, hundreds of thousands of pictures of dogs and cats, and for each one, you give the result. This is a dog, this is a cat. Picture of a dog, a picture of a cat, right? And the machine learning program or the net calculates the parameters to transform the pixels in the pictures into cat or dog, right? But nobody examines these parameters. Nobody, So also with programs that are proprietary, the owners of the program forbid the people to open it, right? To see how it works. And it would be very difficult to discover how a huge program works, almost impossible, right? So what's happening is that with these programs, machine learning programs, using those programs, we are using programs that nobody knows how they work. Even the designers don't know, because you put those thousands of input data and come and output data to under quotes train the program. Machines are not trained, they just record the data and calculate parameters. But anyhow, in the training process, right, they use these input and output, and they don't know what parameters are calculated. Then there is a very, very interesting story about a graduate student some years ago that decided to open a program that was distinguishing between wolves and dogs, right? You know what he discovered? He discovered that the environment was being used to decide between a dog and a wolf, because dogs were in a house or a garden or on the street, and wolves were in forests, on the snow and so on. So it was not the shape of the head or the body that was being used, as everybody thought, right? So this is a very, very peculiar situation, Angus. Before these machine learning programs, the programmers were doing the programming. And when a programmer is doing a program, is developing a program, he is writing each command, right, that later on will be translated into machine language. That was one of my specialties, compiler construction. Anyhow, and he writes a command, and he knows exactly, mathematically exactly, he knows well what the computer is going to do.
The function that he's just created.
Yeah, the computer is a mathematical machine, and a program is also a piece of mathematics. It could be regarded as a theorem that proves that when you give an input, it gives such a result, right? And so the programmer knew very well what each command did. He figured out how the algorithm would perform and so on. If there were no errors, the computer would perform exactly what was thought by the programmer. But with machine learning, the computer is generating new algorithms, changing parameters of a limited set of algorithms. Each machine learning system works only with, for instance, if it's recognizing pictures, it's not going to recognize words and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so this is a big problem that people don't know how these programs work. Even the designers of the machine learning system don't know for the special application that is going to be used.
Can I ask a question there?
Yes.
Because one of the many hot topics in AI at the moment is like the potential dangers of AI. How does what you're saying there, it's like the complete lack of insight into what these algorithms are actually doing, how does that feed into this danger narrative that they are talking about?
The biggest danger is when these programs take choices. Computers don't make decisions. They take choices, logical choices. So when the computer, one of these systems take logical choices instead of human decisions, comes the big problem. Because humans have capacities that computers will never have, machines will never have. And this will be one of the topics of my lecture, because what I've been talking the whole time until now I don't think it will come out in the lecture. Maybe about the artificial intelligence at the end. But anyhow, so when humans will delegate their decisions to computers taking logical choices without feelings, without human reasoning, right? Because what the computer does, it simulates human reasoning, but only of one particular type, algorithmic thinking, and not general thinking, only algorithmic. Well, in parentheses, I think many people don't know what an algorithm is. For instance, Yuval Harari, who wrote those books about algorithms and so on, right? Homo Deus, and so we have the three of them translated in Portuguese. I don't think he knows exactly what an algorithm is. An algorithm, in the mathematical sense, in the computer sense, is a sequence of instructions, each one mathematically well defined, right? Also, in a very limited mathematics. It's discrete mathematics. It's not continuous mathematics like calculus and differential calculus and so on. It's discrete mathematics, right? And these sequence of instructions these instructions are performed or should be performed, should be executed sequentially, unless there is an instruction telling to go back or to jump to another
Yeah.
part of the algorithm, right? And the algorithm has to end for any input data. If it doesn't end for some data, it keeps, for instance, in a loop,
Yeah.
an infinite loop. It's not an algorithm; it's a semi-algorithm, right? And people don't know exactly, I think, what algorithms is, and they are speaking about algorithms in a very broad sense, which is not correct, right? And well, in
So
general,
can I tell a story there, and then you comment on it with your expertise?
yeah,
Hopefully, I'll get enough of the details correct. I read this story a couple of weeks ago. The U.S. Air Force was testing out a missile system. Do you know this story?
no,
Okay, so basically, they wanted to like see how useful AI would be in a battle scenario,
yeah,
and the AI had been tasked with blowing up this whatever it was they were supposed to blow up.
yeah,
But then the human operators like decided that it had to be terminated. But the AI had already determined that it was going to fulfill this. So it knew it wasn't allowed to kill the operator because they had programmed that. So it thought, well, how can I stop him from countermanding what was my ultimate goal? I'll blow up the tower in which he is operating. This was a story in the news literally like 2-3 weeks ago, which is it's like a classic example. I think it's an interesting example of what you're saying there. They don't know what they're dealing with because a kid of 5 can hear there's some can feel. I think this is
yeah,
the opposite word here, isn't
yeah,
it? Can
yeah,
feel how this is wrong, but this super intelligent AI
yeah,
that the US Army is trying out
yeah.
can't figure out that something's going wrong there.
Yes, yes. So you see, the problem is that uh, machines have no feelings, and they simulate a very limited kind of our thinking, algorithmic
Mhm.
thinking. And this is not enough for many human applications, like in social sciences, like in medicine, and so on. And what is the big danger? The big danger is that people will start using these systems like doctors for diagnosis, right? And they'll be based solely on these results and not from their own judgment. This is a big challenge and big problem. Uh, um, and I, you see, these systems can be very useful. For instance, in the diagnosis, I know a story. I don't know if I read it. I think I read it on the internet. A story of a lady that had a dog, and the dog had a sickness. So she went to the veterinary, and the veterinary well, made a diagnosis and prescribed some drugs, and the dog didn't improve. So she put the symptoms into the internet or one of these
Mhm.
uh, machine learning systems, and the result uh, was a series of probable sicknesses. So she showed that to the veterinary. The veterinary said, "Oh, this one, I forgot about this one. Let's try this one." And it was exactly what the dog had. So you see, what is the big problem? The big problem, well, one of the big problems, is that humans are making so many mistakes, but so many mistakes, that machines will eventually perform much better. And I have
Mhm.
an example for that. Autonomous cars.
Yeah.
I think 90% of traffic accidents are due to human faults, how to say, human
Error. Yeah.
errors,
Mhm.
mistakes. If autonomous computers will reduce that to 50% of all accidents, it will be a terrific gain.
Yeah.
So, what is the big problem? Big problem is what kind of people we have today. you see, people are less and less using their human judgment. In everyday life, they are they are performing as an automaton, right? They are following rules. Everybody wants to follow rules and not to decide by themselves. And in these cases, in the amount of errors that humans perform, I have the fear that artificial intelligence will win in the future. You see, it will be better to use artificial intelligence than use human judgment. And this is a big, big, big problem. And there are already problems occurring. I don't know if you are acquainted with a system called Compass with one S in the United States. Enter the internet and you'll see about that. I have
Is it a
written
recruitment system to do with recruitment? Company recruitment? No?
not to do not recruitment, to do judicial sentences.
Oh, there was an interesting case recently, wasn't there,
Yes,
where a guy submitted papers that had been
yes.
created by.
Yes, I mentioned that in my booklet, Artificial Intelligence. AI, artificial intelligence, or automated imbecility. AI, automated
Yeah,
imbecility.
yeah.
Can machines think and feel? And I mentioned this question of the compass, and the compass is being used by judges to judge if a convicted person, or how to say, a person being judged, will be dangerous in the future or not, right? If this person will be, how,
It's gonna re-offend. Is that what you mean?
what is the chance of the person doing again
Yeah,
the
re-offending.
crime,
Yeah, yeah.
right? How do you say in English?
To re-offend.
Reoffend again. Okay,
Yeah.
very good. Well, and there was a famous case in some state in the United States where a person was driving a car that he borrowed the car from a friend, and this friend committed some crime using that car. So this person was caught and sentenced using this compass. And the compass system decided that there was a big chance of reoffending from this person, and he was sentenced to 5 years of jail. Now he made how to say, I don't know the word in English, recourse. No, he
He
challenged
he challenged it. Yeah,
he
he
challenged
challenged the decision.
this decision. He
Yeah,
wanted to know why what were the reasons for having judging him dangerous, right? But the problem is that the judge had used the compass system. He challenged that. It went to the Supreme Court in the state, and the Supreme Court, how to say, revalidated the judge decision. So nobody knew what were the reasons why he was condemned to 5 years. Right? He didn't know, and the Supreme Court doesn't know, didn't know, and the owners of the Compass program didn't want to open the program, right, so that people could see what parameters had been calculated, and
yeah,
so you see, this is the big problem when these systems will be used for taking human decisions. And I fear that it will happen more and more. Why? Because people are taking many, many times wrong decisions. Why? Because they don't have a uh, a knowledge of what a human being is, of what nature is,
yeah.
which is given by anthroposophy. Without any spiritual view of the human being, one cannot reach the correct decisions, you see, because a human being is not just a material being, right? And these programs will handle people as
Determine
machines.
people's fates. Yeah.
This is a very interesting question. I don't know if you have ever questioned yourself. How does the computer treat myself? How does the computer treat myself? The computer treats yourself as a computer.
Of course, it can't do anything else.
Cannot do anything else. So we are reduced to computers or to machines when we are working with a computer, right? Not exactly, because, for instance, we can figure out phrases and so on and type them on the keyboard and so on.
But we're still having to think in accordance with something that it will understand.
Yes. Also, very important thing is that the computer forces the user to use what I call computer thinking,
Yeah.
a kind of thinking that is one can insert into the computer. If I think something that I cannot insert into the computer, right, I
Syntax
cannot do
error.
it.
Yeah.
It stays with me. I have to think in terms of the computer, right? I have to how to say, I have to,
To become algorithmic in my thinking.
yes. Otherwise I cannot. And also think in formal symbolic, in a
Yeah.
formal symbolic language, right? Not in a natural language, right? Full of flexible understandings, ambiguities, and so on. I cannot give something, or any computer cannot be ambiguous. Otherwise, the computer would not be useful, right? The computer is a deterministic machine, and here we have a very interesting point: is that using materials from nature, natural materials, that are not deterministic. They are transformed, they are industrialized in such a way that they become deterministic, so that the computer is a deterministic machine. It will always give 2 plus 2 equals to 4 and not 5 or 3. If it would, the computer would not be deterministic. It would not be useful at all. Sometimes it would give some result, and other times it would give another result. So it's the only deterministic machine in the world, the computer. Not exactly. The computer may crash. The circuits may fail, and the computer may crash. How mainly when it's running Windows. That's a known factor. But anyhow, uh, most of the time, computers are deterministic machines doing exactly what one
They're told to
teaches
do.
them to do. Right? All right.
And even when they're generating random number, they're doing it from an algorithm that's based on the clock or something like that.
Well, in general, it's worse than that. If it would be based, it would have a seed. The clock is a seed. It would be really random. But what they do is that they use a fixed seed. So the sequence is always deterministic. Right?
Okay.
The sequence. Yeah. Yes. But yes. But if they would use as a seed the clock, then it would be random, right?
Okay.
But after the seed, after generating the seed, the rest is deterministic.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because it uses an algorithm to transform each one into the next one, right?
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, what else can I tell?
I think you've given you've given a wonderful description of, without going into specifically what you're going to be talking about, but the field that you're going to be talking about at the conference here is the problematic area of AI, with lots of examples and a detailed description of the nature of the problem. And it sounds like it's going to be deeply fascinating. I really I'm going to have to, yeah, I won't be coming all the way from Sweden, but I'm going to be following it online.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to hearing what
Yeah.
you have to say on this subject, because I am actually a little bit of a techie nerd as well. I had my first computer when I was 12 years old, and I learned to program in BASIC, and then I was compiling in machine code. But I was also perhaps a little bit like you. I am a humanist.
Yes.
But
Yes.
there are. It confers a lot of advantages on you if you are also able to think.
Yes. I would like
pragmatically.
to add one thing.
Sure, go for it.
My biggest struggle is to show that materialism has no substance. How could I say? Materialism is not satisfactory, right? It doesn't satisfy. Uh, because Steiner said the materialism is a sickness, right? And I want to show that. I want to show people that materialism is not a good way of regarding the world, right? And this is my main struggle in the world, showing people with their own words, scientists with their own words. Look at the small paper I wrote called well, it's in the title is in Portuguese, but I think I translated it to, because it's a bilingual text, bilingual. It shows how I do a translation in two columns, right? One language in one, and the other column, the other language. And it's called Brains and Concepts and Brains. Let me see if I have that, if this is the name in my on my the title on my homepage. Just a moment.
Sure.
The brain.
Whilst you look for that, are you? I know there's a guy called Bernardo Kastrup he wrote a book amongst others called "Materialism is Baloney." I think
I have this book.
Yeah.
Yes, I have this book.
He's an interesting guy to follow, and I'm not saying I agree with everything he says, but in certain areas his thinking is incredibly sharp.
Yes, but I use other arguments.
Yeah.
Well, let me see here. Just a moment.
What did?
Well,
consequences of materialism.
Concepts and the brain. Concepts. Look for concepts on my web page. My homepage.
Oh, yeah, I found it. 8.7 on the spirituality and anthroposophy.
Exactly. You see, this is bilingual, and look the way I show how concepts cannot be stored into the brain. In the brain. Right? Give a look at that later on.
I will do, and I'll also link to it in the show notes.
Yeah. And this will show how I try to address common people, showing that the spirit exists, and materialism is not satisfactory as a world view of the world. As I say, world vision.
I want to thank you very much, Valdemar. It's been a real pleasure listening to you. All the wisdom I can hear, and I'm sure we could sit here for another 10 hours, and you could tell us about all the interesting things that are happening in Brazil. It's like in the field of computer science. But I suppose we have to press the stop button sometime, don't we?
Yes. You see, I am almost 83, so I have collected many things.
Yeah.
I know.
And it is wonderful that there's this conference where you can be part of sharing that with people, so that they can take the flag and move us forward into the future. Really great.
Showing that machines will never be able to think in human terms or to feel in human terms or even in animal terms, I think is very important to demystify what computers are and what computers will be able to do in the future.
So is that your actual title, Demystifying AI? Or
no.
That's good, because I'll use that instead for this video.
Yes. Or you may use the title of that book that was published by Emrine, by Frederick Emrine.
Okay. Remind me of the title there.
It's AI. AI.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence or automated imbecility.
Automated imbecility. Oh, that's good. That's good.
Can computers think and feel? And this Andrew suggested, can robots think and feel?
Mm-hmm.
That's the title of my lecture. Can robots think and feel? And I'll show that machines will never be able to do that.
Great. Okay. Pleasure.
Think in terms, right?
Yeah. Yes. Pleasure talking to you.
Good.
Enjoy the rest of your day in Sao Paulo. And,
yes, and I'm sorry for my poor English, because when you get older and older, you begin to lose your foreign languages, and I have many of them.
I don't think there's anybody that had any problems whatsoever understanding what you're saying. I thought it was you were very clear.
Sometimes a word is missing, but that's all right.
Okay, great. Look after yourself. Pleasure talking to you.
Ciao.
Ciao.